Rickman could never quite manage to reproduce the music he heard in his head. It had been in there as long as he could remember, even when the nursery rhymes and the pop music of his pre-teen years had long since faded into a monotonous background drone. Still the music was there. It was alive and vibrant, singing to him from all the dark places in his mind, there as he worked, there as he played, there as he slept, haunting his dreams. Over the years he'd tried almost everything to get it out. Guitar at 12, piano at 14, an interesting experiment with drums and drugs in his early 20s, and violin throughout his 30s. None of them, although each diverting in its own way, had made any difference to his peace of mind. The music had stayed in his head, preferring to take a life of its own, preferring to hijack Rickman at the most inopportune moments with snatches of wistful rhythms and soaring choruses full of longing. The frustration Rickman felt at not being able to share this inner beauty was almost too much for a man to bear. But now he had hope. Technology had just caught up enough that he might finally have a chance at bringing his inner music out into the real world. It had taken every penny he had, and the resulting hardware filled most of his already cramped attic apartment. But it was a small price to pay. He would call it Soundscapes of the City, and it would make him his fortune. Of that Rickman was certain. How can it fail? All it had taken to get him on track was a demonstration of a machine from Dreamsoft Productions and the latest sampling software from Mythos. A mixing desk and a holographic array did the rest. Music and images could be created from the subtle differences in electrical impulses in his brain while he dreamed, and then merged with any sound, or indeed any part of the electromagnetic spectrum, that he desired. Rickman's visions of bringing his magnum opus to the world were now that much closer to reality. For the past 40 nights he'd sampled and tweaked, taking the raw sounds that streamed into his loft apartment from the city outside and merging them with his dream compositions to form a holographic construct of sound and light and ionized gas in an ever-moving plasma bubble. It now hung like a giant amoeba in the array in the center of his room, an amoeba that sang and danced to his ever more insistent tune. It had been a long, hard journey to this point. During those first few days everything was sharp and jagged, harsh mechanical discordance that, while it had a certain musical quality, was not what he needed, not if he was going to take the world by storm. The plasma had roiled and torn, refusing to take a permanent shape, and Rickman despaired of what the city was telling him. Everything was ugly, mean-spirited. The music of the city spoke only of despair and apathy, and his dreams didn't make a dent when he overlaid them. Then he had his epiphany. Aptly it came to him in a dream more vivid than any he had ever had previously, as if the mere act of accessing the dream machine had unlocked something within him, allowing the full vision to emerge. It starts with thin whistling, like a simple peasant's flute played at a far distance. At first all is black. The flute stops and the first star flares in the darkness. And with it comes the first chord, a deep A minor that sets the darkness spinning. The blackness resolves itself into spinning masses of gas that coalesce and thicken, bubbling and foaming before resolving into great black eggs, oiled and glistening, calving over and over, reaching critical mass and exploding into a symphony that fills the void with colour and song. Stars wheel overhead in a great dance, the music of the spheres cavorting in his head. Rickman jumped from his bed and checked the sampling box. It had recorded nearly 30 minutes of material, streamed directly from his brain as he slept. "I have it! I finally have it!" He hooked the sampling box to the mixer and holographic array and started to play with the resulting sounds. He had hoped for immediate results, but he was to be disappointed again. At first it was still all too mechanical, with none of the grandeur and sweep of his dreams. Then he remembered the stars. He went out onto his balcony and realigned his antennae, pointing it, not down toward the city, but up, to the sky and the dome of stars above. He got results almost immediately. The plasma rolled and formed a sphere, a ball of shining silver held in the holographic array, hovering at head height, quivering like quicksilver. At first it just hung there in space, giving out a deep bass hum that rattled his teeth and set all the glassware in the apartment ringing. Things changed quickly when he double, then triple-tracked the sounds from his dreams, adding depth and resonance to them with each new layer of aural complexity. Shapes formed in the plasma, concretions that slid and slithered, rainbow light shimmering over their surface like oil on water. They sang as they danced. Rickman soon found that by moving the antenna to a point at different areas of the sky, he was able to get the plasma to merge or to multiply. Each collision or split gave off a new chord, the plasma taking on solid forms in a seemingly infinite variety of shapes. As they swam, his creation sang in orchestrated overtures to the dark beauty of the night. But it still wasn't right. The song wasn't what he heard in his head, and nothing else would do but to keep trying until it was perfect. He turned a knob to see if applying some distortion to his dream samples might do the trick. The array continued to whine and throb, in a strangely musical beat. But the plasma burst with a soft pop, spilling like viscous liquid to the bottom of the box, coalescing and congealing. By the time Rickman walked over to investigate, something lay curled at the bottom of the array. At first he could not quite believe what he was seeing. This was no plasma, this was a creature, alive and breathing. The thing that had Rickman most worried was that he recognized it, a thing from childhood nightmares. It used to hide in the downstairs closet of the first house he remembered. A beast that had the body of a man, but the head of some grotesque, misshapen rodent. Its fur was patchy. Mange and age had left it showing pale, sallow skin in places where it should have fur, with weeping sores running the length of its body. Long yellow teeth hung over a short lower jaw. The left incisor was cracked and broken near the tip, giving the face a lopsided expression that was very far from being comical. Worst of all, a long pink tail rose and fell, swished once, then thumped in time with the musical vibration and hum that ran through the array. Red eyes blinked, opened and looked straight at Rickman. Rickman stepped back, half expecting an attack, but the thing seemed more interested in the music. It pawed at the air in an obscene parody of an orchestra's conductor, then stood unsteady on back legs that looked more suited to crouching. To Rickman's astonishment it began to dance, its diseased body swaying softly, almost seductively. Then it surprised Rickman again. It sang along with the beat, nonsense words in a guttural tone that sounded almost like a chant. To Rickman's ears the whole thing was as harsh and dissonant as the city sounds outside the window. "That isn't right at all." Rickman retreated to the mixing desk and turned a knob. The rhythm speeded up. The rodent thing danced faster, legs pumping, an almost frantic jig. It sang, putting everything it had into it, as fervent as any tenor, screeching and wailing as if in pain. The whole room shook and vibrated, and Rickman felt as if the top of his head might come off with the pressure. He dialed the distortion knob all the way back to the off position, and finally, with another soft pop, the mutant rodent vanished, its form being subsumed back into a swirling, glowing mass as the plasma reformed in the dead centre of the array. The ball of shimmering quicksilver hung there, quivering as if daring him to try something else. Rickman, while dismayed that his experiment had taken such a strange turn, was not too disappointed. "I'm on to something here. I'm really on to something." He played with his dials and knobs, testing the boundaries of the plasma with multi-tracking, distortion, feedback and echo effects. He found that at the top range of power, with echo full on, the plasma was forced into an egg-like configuration. No longer silver but black and roiling, the surface covered in an oily sheen that cast a rainbow aurora around the room. With only the minutest twitch of the knobs, things could be born from the egg, things that would dance, things that would sing just for him. After his disappointment with the rodent thing, he was only slightly happier with his second creation. As before, the field boundary popped when he turned a knob, just slightly too far. This time the floor of the array was coated in several inches of grey slime that was already hardening and fusing into a solid glass-like mass. There were things embedded in it, blood and hair and bones and eyes, all jumbled like a manic jigsaw, fused and running into one another as if assembled by a demented sculptor. It was only when he spotted the chipped and yellowed incisor that he realized what he was seeing. He had no idea what to do next, but fortunately the decision was taken for him. Something rose up out of the glassy mass, slowly at first, then punching its way through the surface with a tinkle of broken glass that was clearly audible even above the vibration and hum. When Rickman looked closer, he saw it was a bone, hollow and holed in several places along its length, a bone that immediately started up a piping whistle, high and reedy, like a gull soaring and swooping through the room, keeping time with the thrum and beat from the array. The sound was not unpleasant, almost harmonious in fact, so Rickman decided to let things play on for a spell to see where they led. More bones forced their way up through the slime, sending their high, whistling voices to join the first, a flock of flautists that blended and merged until it was like an orchestrated choir, singing in time with Rickman's dream compositions. "But it's still not right." Without hesitation he turned the echo knob sharply to the off position. Once again the plasma reformed into the shining quicksilver globe in the centre of the array. The chamber fell silent. By small, almost minuscule stages, Rickman began to turn the knob again, taking care not to go too far, determined to prevent the plasma from popping this time. He was rewarded for his patience. A new black egg formed and quivered, an oily rainbow aura dancing over it. Ever so slowly it became two, a shimmering sheen running over their sleek black surface. They hummed to themselves, a high singing that was taken up and amplified by an answering whine from the enclosing array. As two eggs became four, the whole room rocked from side to side in rhythm as a drumbeat kicked in to force the tempo. Better. The dance had begun. 4 eggs became 8. The air above Rickman filled with singing, filled with the rhythm of the dance. His whole body shook, vibrating in time. His head swam, and it seemed as if walls of the room melted and ran. The scene receded into a great distance until it was little more than a pinpoint in a blanket of darkness, and he was alone, in a cathedral of emptiness, when nothing existed save the dark and the pounding chant. And then there was light. He saw stars, vast swathes of gold and blue and silver, all dancing in great purple and red clouds that spun webs of grandeur across unending vistas. Shapes moved in and among the nebulae, dark, wispy shadows casting a pallor over whole galaxies at a time, shadows that capered and whirled as the dance grew ever more frenetic. He was buffeted as if by a strong, surging tide, but as the beat grew ever stronger he cared little. He gave himself to it, lost in the dance, lost in the stars. He did not know how long he wandered in that space between. He forgot himself, forgot everything but the dancing in the vastness where only rhythm mattered. He may even have been there yet, had the hologram's boundary not collapsed with a shriek. This time he had to hurry to dismiss the thing that the collapsing field left behind. It was the size of a grown man, but looked more like a hideous shrimp. The body was segmented and chitinous like that of a crustacean, but this was no marine creature. It had membranous wings, currently tucked tightly against its back, giving it a hunched appearance. There were no arms or hands to speak of, although Rickman counted 4 pairs of limbs. The pair the thing used as legs were more stout and thicker than the rest, each being tipped with 3 horny claws extended to balance its weight at the front, while a segmented tail completed the tripod behind it. The other appendages looked more flexible and nimble. It turned slightly, and Rickman got a good look at its face. Instead of features there was only a mound of ridged flesh, pale and greasy like a mushroom towards the end of its cycle. A multitude of thin snake-like appendages wafted around its head, turning as one and looking straight at Rickman. They started to thrash. At first he thought it too was dancing in time to the beat of the music, but the walls of his array began to quake, and the thing inside thrashed harder. Its wings unfolded and the huge tail beat at the confinement of the boundary field. Rickman's plasma container wailed and screamed louder than any amplified feedback whine at the assault. This isn't right at all. He was forced to switch the machinery off completely, and even then the thing seemed reluctant to go, fighting and thrashing as it was torn into mere scraps of plasma that wafted gently in the air before finally winking out with another soft pop. Rickman stood at the mixing desk, fingers gripping the edge of the box so tightly that his knuckles were white and his palms felt bruised and battered when he willed himself to let go and relax. The music in his head took longer to fade than the pain in his hands. Once he had recovered his breath, the main thing that Rickman remembered was not the hideous prawn-like thing in the box, but the dance and the time he had spent lost in the rhythm of the spheres. He wanted that again. He wanted it badly. "I'm close now." He switched his machine back on. The holographic field sparked and buzzed and the array began to throb and vibrate. The plasma formed almost immediately and started to sing and dance even before Rickman turned the echo knob slowly clockwise. A tear formed in reality, a black oily droplet appearing to hang in the air. A perfect black egg, already singing. The walls of the room throbbed like a heartbeat. The black egg pulsed in time. The singing got louder, like a chorus of angels, far away, singing into a wind. Rickman turned the knob a millimetre to the right. The egg carved, and carved again. 4 eggs hung in a tight group, pulsing in time with the throbbing music that was getting steadily louder and more insistent as a distant drumbeat kicked in, hard and heavy. Colours danced and flowed across the sheer black surfaces. blues and greens and shimmering silvers on the eggs. In the blink of an eye there were 8. Rickman started to sway and hum along with the beat, singing under his breath, getting lost in the moment. It's working. 16 now, all perfect, all dancing. The vibration grew louder still. 32 now, and they had started to fill the array with dancing aurora of rainbow shimmering lights that pulsed and capered in time with the music. It's really working. 64, each a pearl of black light. The colours filled the room, spilled out over the floor, crept around Rickman's feet, danced in his eyes, in his head, all through his body. He gave himself to it willingly. The room filled with stars, and he danced among them. 128 eggs in the chamber, and already carving into 256. Rickman danced. Rickman sang. The eggs sang with him. There were too many of them to count now. They spilled out of the array, filled the space in the room, their song rising higher, the beat and thrum of the music filling his head, the dancing rainbow colours filling his eyes with blue and green and gold and wonderment. Rickman was at peace. He danced in empty spaces filled with oily glistening eggs. They carved and spawned yet more eggs and even more, until he swam in a swirling sea of eggs and colours and songs and dancing. Lost. So lost that he did not even notice when he was joined in the dance. First came the rodent things, tails thumping, paws slapping, their voices raised high in a chant that called their gods to them. High and free a whistling rose up, soaring as a myriad bone flutes came in on the beat and joined them. Membranous wings fluttered somewhere high above. Eggs carved, releasing even more of their number into the dance, and carved again and again. Rickman's room could no longer contain them. They spilled out into the city. Rickman went with them.